Hey everyone, it's Joanna here. I am with the Alkalign Lifestyle Wellness Center, and today we are going to dive into the second energy center. This is from my 7-core chakra healing workbook, and we are discussing the second chakra, which is the sacral chakra. And if you have not watched my first video on this series, the 7-core chakra healing workbook series, this is deliberately from my 7-core chakra healing workbook that I wrote based off of my experiences with healing and balancing the 7-core chakra system. As you may recall in the first video, and if you need to watch as a recap, you go to the library and you can click on the video. I think I have the video posted somewhere on here. You can go back to that video and watch that on the root chakra. So getting into our second energy center, our sacral chakra, you can call it, as I mentioned in the last video, you can call it interchangeably a chakra or an energy center. And the second energy center is also known as the sacral chakra. Okay, so the sacral chakra is actually, it is associated with the color orange. And again, if you're looking at this color spectrum, your root chakra, as I mentioned previously, is associated with the color red, and your sacral chakra is just above that, and it's the color orange. And your sacral chakra houses your hips, your pelvis, your womb space if you're a woman. It covers our lower back and all the fluid systems of the body, your urinary, your lymphatic, your sexual, your pleasure, desire, and emotional identity as well. It's connected to our sexuality and creativity. When it's balanced, it allows us to give and receive pleasure sexually and sensually. Now, there's a difference between the two. Sexually is through your sexual energy. It is the energy that you exchange with a partner. And sexual energy can be transmuted in other ways. People do this through their work. Sensual energy is your sensuality is like the senses, the aromas, the feeling, the touches, the vibrations, those things. So it's all in your sensuality. Your sexuality is a sexual energy. It's a primal energy. It's a spiritual energy at that as well. And it is used to kind of, depending on how you're using it, but in like energetic exchanges between a couple, you would use it as becoming almost that two becomes one sort of thing, but it's two are connecting with a divine spirit, and that is what that is. But sexual energy is also the energy of playfulness. It's the energy of creativity, and thus why when you have sex it creates a baby, right? So your sexual energy is that of creation and play, and sensuality is what you use to explore that sexuality. All right, so this energy center is developed between 6 and 24 months of life, where we start moving into the phase of locomotion, which would be crawling, movement, sensual experiences of the world. This is where we also start getting into like the oral phase, where we want to put things in our mouths. So you'll notice that with young ones, when they're in that locomotion phase, they want to put everything that they see into their mouth because it's a sensory. They are using their senses to collect information about their environment. So we use this as we're young to gain information, but older, when we have an imbalanced sacral chakra, we can actually use this as a place of comfort and soothing. And yes, we did use that as children too, but what happens is, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, but what happens is when the sacral chakra is imbalanced or there's an energetic blockage there, we tend to go for things for a soothing purpose, right? So again, this is an area of developing boundaries, restricting or expressing natural movement. And if you happen to lack healthy boundaries, there's definitely an indicator that you have some work to do in your sacral chakra. Traumas and abuses to your second chakra. And I'm going to use that interchangeably: second chakra, second energy center, and sacral chakra throughout this video. Sexual abuse of any kind, incest, emotional abuse, such as denial, minimizing of your emotions by others, including parents or guardians, neglect, and manipulation. A balanced chakra has a feeling of good, being graceful in our movement, fluidity in our physical body and with the world. So it has more of like the go with the flow energy. Emotional intelligence, nurturing ourselves and others, and the ability to change. So this looks like we have the ability to identify our emotions and respond accordingly, not react. And also being able to go with the flow, knowing when it's time to have fluidity and when it's time to stand our ground. That's where your boundaries come in. Excessive tendencies look like sexual acting out, sexual addiction, manipulation, overrun and overruled by emotions, hypersensitivity, lack of boundaries or poor boundaries, and codependency. So this could look like somebody who, for example, for me, when I was younger, I was very sexually explorative. But when I experienced some traumas and I didn't know how to emotionally navigate those incidences, I acted out in a lot of ways. And one of the ways I acted out was in being sexually like promiscuous, but in a really unhealthy way, because I got to a point where I was taking in so many other energies that just were not healthy for me. My vibration was put out that I am weak, I am vulnerable, I lack I lack boundaries, and I lack, self-respect. And that drew in people who were kind of aligned with the same thing energetically, and they knew how to take advantage of a vulnerable, weaker person. So if that rings any bells for you, again, this is an indicator that you have some work to do in your second energy center. Deficiencies look like rigidity, frigidity, fear of sexuality, and sensuality. So you might have sensory issues. You might not like certain sensory feelings. I know some people that don't like taking their shoes off because they don't like the feeling of what's underneath their feet when they're walking on the floor. I know of people who don't like certain sensations from food when they eat. They don't like certain foods. They refuse to eat. I know somebody who refuses to eat bananas. And a lot of this goes back to traumas that we've had or deficiencies that we have in our sacral chakra. And this could have been, I think of people that have had some really traumatic experiences sexually, and there are sensories that remind them of that abuse that they endured. So that could just be one example. So some essential oils or fragrances or colors associated with the second energy center. You can think of the second energy center, it's a color of orange, like I mentioned earlier. Orange brings out this citrusy kind of aroma. So orange, grapefruit, rose, and jasmine are associated with this energy center. So for essential oil aromatherapies, you could use those essential oils. Again, like I mentioned in the last video, you can rub those on, rub a few drops on the palm of your hand, rub them together. Cup your hands over your mouth, inhale, get a good inhale in, and let those fragrances stimulate the amygdala gland. You can also place anywhere else on the body that you feel called to. Now, there are sound frequencies that are associated with this energy center, and the sound frequency is 417 hertz. This frequency can be played vibrationally or through sound healing. Again, I like to go to YouTube, and I will just type in 417 hertz in the search engine bar, and I will get a whole population of different frequencies that people have created that are tuned to 417 hertz. And you can play that throughout the day while you're sleeping. And what I like to do is I will play the frequencies throughout the day, or I will play them, say I'm like having like a really frustrating moment in my waking hours and I just need to calibrate my energy, and I will go specifically to that energy center. I will take a body check and do a body scan, and it will take notice of where I'm feeling a restriction in my body. And then that gives me an indicator of what frequency I need to play. And then I will play that frequency through my headphones, or I may just, blast it on a speaker, and I will play it, and I will just sit there almost like a meditation, and I will allow myself to tune to that frequency, which has been very helpful for me. And I will do it even at night while I'm sleeping. I will play the frequency in my headphones. I don't use Bluetooth headphones. I use corded headphones in a device that is not hooked up to cellular reception, so that there is no interference while I'm sleeping. So it's just a very neutral device, and I have the frequencies playing in my earbuds while I'm sleeping. Now, this was really uncomfortable at first to get used to, but over time I got used to it, and I sleep much, much better than I ever have in the past. Like, I sleep really well. So some examples as far as activities and things that you can do to work with this energy center. So the element of the sacral chakra is water. As I mentioned before, this is allowing things to be very fluid because it is harnessing your fluids of the body. So imagine you're like water and you go with the flow. Allow yourself to release tensions that arise through physical movements or emotions that arise through thoughts and reactions to circumstances. Many of us don't have a high capacity to explore sensation, so it's important to utilize tools and exercises to teach us how to increase sensitivity in our bodies, such as hatha yoga, dance, masturbation, exercise, so we become more at home with our sensations. Now, this is important. This is a really great practice to get into doing some grounding things with the body. So movement. Again, I mentioned masturbation, dance, yoga. And some people get really uncomfortable with the masturbation part, especially women. And I agree, I've been there myself. Masturbation was a thing I thought was so fun and explorative when I was younger. And then at some point, it was like that was considered inappropriate and kind of shameful. So for a while, I stopped. But what I noticed when I was allowing myself to do it was my imagination and my sense of play were much more vibrant and alive. My interest in sex, my libido was increased. And so I enjoyed engaging with my partner when I was actually able to give myself pleasure. I wanted to share that with somebody else. And what happens is, especially for women, we get shunned for doing this. I have used masturbation as a form of healing parts of me that needed to be healed, allowing things to be expressed that needed to be expressed, that I was too afraid to voice and to speak out about externally. But this was like my safe haven to not run and hide from life, but allow myself to be in my own body and in my imagination, and allow the things that need to be expressed. And so this was a really, really great container for me. And many people have found this a very helpful container or vehicle as well for releasing old stagnant energy, to cultivating creativity and play back into their lives, and enhancing their sexual relationships with their partners and engaging in that sensuality. Natural holding patterns accumulate in our bones, and I will say tissues as well, due to subconscious patterns and coping mechanisms, old injuries, and our beliefs and perceptions, as well as our genetic makeup. So what this means is that when we go through life and we have traumatic things that happen to us, it could be small, seemingly small or acute traumas, or they could be more larger scale traumas, more like profound traumas, right? And either way, when we have not actually allowed the response to come through and surface through us, we suppress it, and that gets blocked in us subconsciously. And so that's where people develop fears and rigidity in life. Like for me, for example, I used to play in the ocean a lot as a kid whenever I would go to the ocean, or I would play in natural bodies of water, and I loved doing this. I loved swimming in a pond or a lake or the ocean or a swimming pool. It didn't matter. I was a little fishy, and I wanted to swim at all times. I didn't care where it was, and I thought it was so cool to swim in the ocean. As I got older, I realized that some of my fears from subconscious things that I picked up over time were influencing me to be afraid of nature and allowing me to be afraid of swimming in the ocean, because what if there's a stingray? What if there's a shark? What if there's a jellyfish? I don't know. And I've heard horror stories, right, of people like frolically swimming in the ocean or playing in the ocean, and then they step on a stingray or a jellyfish, and then that's it. Like that limb is like destroyed, right? So I'm afraid, right? And I developed that over time. Although I didn't actually go through a traumatic experience, I heard something that triggered me and was like, ooh, be careful. And so as I got older and the less and less time I spent in the water, I just grew afraid of it. And I realized that, like recently, getting back into it and swimming in the ocean again, I actually did see sharks. I saw little like tiger sharks, and it was so endearing because I was like literally afraid. Like, what if I see a dolphin? What am I gonna do? I don't know. Like, I'm just not in the right state of mind to like handle that. I'm just, I'm like, it's cold and I don't know what's in here. And if there's a surprise, this is not the time to surprise me, right? And so I was holding myself back from really enjoying and getting the benefits of this plunge into the cold oceanic Pacific Ocean water. But once I was able to breathe through it and allow myself to just embrace the sensations that I was feeling, whether it was seaweed coming up, grazing my leg, or even seeing something that was, a little shark, like two little sharks swimming by me, I'm like, okay, well, it is what it is. Like, this is their home, and I mean, this is my home too. So it just helped me to like recondition my mind so that I am not afraid of going with the flow of life, as an example. Okay, instead of running away and limiting the sensations, allow them to flourish and investigate what kind of medicine and insight the language of sensation has for us. So again, going back to the ocean, when I'm getting in the water and it's frigid cold, I mean, it's now officially December in Southern California, and the Pacific Ocean is not warm at all. It's really not warm throughout the entire year, but the winter, it's especially not warm. And one of the things that I have not really ever enjoyed since probably middle school was cold water. And by me allowing myself to feel the sensation of cold water on my body, it was like I instantly was able to warm myself up because I'm calm and relaxed. I'm breathing and getting oxygen in, because I know that in order for me to withstand this cold, I need to be calm and relaxed. And by allowing me to do so, I was able to get the benefits of cold plunging in the ocean, which, I mean, you get electrically charged from this. And all of the other benefits that come from being in cold climates and cold water. Like, cold water therapy is exceptional for the nervous system. And for me, it was a really great reminder of like where my rigidity and where my boundaries and limitations were just with that alone. Not a super like life-threatening example, but it is just one of the many things, one of the many examples that I can point to where I have found that I have work that I still need to do, because we're human beings and we're constantly going through life. Like, you're not gonna, in my opinion, you're not going to always be free and clear and pure. You're always gonna have things coming up. this is just a redirection for you to go inward and realize and see what areas just need a little bit of attention. Okay, so it's important that we become to a very healthy relationship with our sexuality and sensuality, because they feed, nurture, and nourish us, but it's not manipulative in any way or dominating, right? So, for example, my husband is very much like a coach in my life, and we have developed a unique bond between us. And one of the things that took me a while to get used to is his way of coaching. My way is I want things to be very soft and subtle and peaceful, and he has a little bit more like strong masculine energy. And that is a sensation that I feel in my body. I can feel somebody else's energy, and not always do I enjoy somebody's strong energy with my less dominant energy at times. But what I have come to cherish is allowing the sensation of his energy to infiltrate into my space and help me help coach me through something that might be a challenge for me. So while that's not necessarily, and it could be in the way or in the form of sex, but it's in other ways too, right? And so allowing the energy to come in and know and understand that it is not a dominating energy that's trying to dictate you, but it's trying to help guide and steer you. And that is very much the masculine energy. The feminine energy wants to be more fluid. It wants to be more relaxed. And that's why we as women benefit much more greatly when we learn how to just be more go with the flow. For men, it's a little bit harder because naturally they are more leaders. So it's just natural for them to step into this role of leading and guiding and not manipulating, but influencing. And so for me as a woman, it has helped me to embrace the more fluid side, if that makes sense. All right, so some meditations and affirmations that you can do to work with this energy center. So I'm going to start with the meditation, and this is something that you can write down. You can write it, and you can record it and read it to yourself, or read it and record it for you to play back and listen to, or you can write it down and you can read it out to yourself. Meditation doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in a state of like your eyes closed and in a trance. It just means that you're being present with yourself. So with this meditation, I want you to sit in a quiet place and then read aloud or listen to a recording of yourself speaking the following meditation. I honor the sexuality of my body and intend to use its power in honor of life and spirit. And now release compulsive urges that would injure, knowing that my spirit fulfills all my needs in a good way. I flow with feelings. I want you to breathe fresh energy into your abdominal area. Relax and release. Envisioning the color of warm orange spreading throughout and around you. That is the aura of your second energy center, your sacral chakra. Following your meditation, you can read this affirmation to yourself. I move with ease and grace. I fluidly and effortlessly transition into the next phase of my life. I am aware that my body responds to my thoughts, reactions, and images of what is. I recognize old pictures, let them go, and return to present time. In this moment, it is possible to feel good about myself. As my emotions change, I flow with conscious awareness of their levels within me. I enjoy describing and expressing my feelings as validations of my humanness. As my body becomes tuned with the present, I regain the ability to feel what is in harmony with my well-being and what is not. And repeat that as many times as you need to. In this workbook, I wrote to repeat it 3 to 4 times, but you can repeat it as many times as you need to until it lands, until you feel that embodiment of what you just said. It is a total full body yes for you. It's now become part of your personality and your identity. So it's important that when we work through these chakra systems, that we focus on reflecting, and it's not being stuck in the past and being wrapped around the history, right, of what happened in our lives, but it's going back and understanding where patterns lie so that we can break those patterns. So one of the reflections I want you to do is to ask yourself, is it easy for you to allow pleasure? Do you work too much? Is there a denial? Do you feel guilty? Now with this, I want you to close your eyes and place your hands on your heart center and focus on one area of your life where you can allow more permission for contentment to feel good and enjoy. I can tell you, for me, it has been a challenge to allow pleasure into my life, and I have been what some may consider a workaholic, working too much, denying pleasure, and feeling guilty about receiving pleasure or receiving gifts into my life. And this is very common for women because we are natural receivers. So if you think of like how our anatomy is structured, we are natural receivers. We receive the masculine energy, we receive energy, but we also give energy too, because we are creating and transferring life through our canal, right? But it is very, very common for women, especially because we've been shamed a lot for around pleasure and sexuality. This has been a societal and a cultural and historical thing for many, 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 many centuries, honestly, for women. And so that lineage gets handed down to us, and it's important for us to understand and recognize that it came from somewhere else, but that doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that just because in the past women were shamed for expressing their sexuality, that it's wrong for me to do that. So it's important, again, to understand where those patterns came from. Like, what do you feel guilty and shameful around, and why? What is it? Is it like in the actual act of sex? Is it in the actual act of receiving pleasure from your partner? Is it, wanting to explore another energy or another body or another experience that you have been thinking about or fantasizing about? And if there's guilt or shame around that, why? It's really important to understand why and write it down until you can't come up with anything else, and then read it, look at it, and then ask yourself, is any of this true? I guarantee most of it's not true. Okay, the next one is consider what your relationship with your own creativity and sexuality. Do you freely express your sexuality, sexual personality, and your sensuality? Do you allow creativity to move through you? Do you allow yourself to go with the flow of your inspiration? Or are you constantly monitoring and managing and have rigid boundaries? This can also look like being a micromanaging and controlling person because you don't allow things to happen. You don't allow for things to unfold. So when I notice even when I have been manifesting something, or I see this when people are manifesting, is sometimes because in the past you had moments where you didn't feel it in control of something, and it blocked you from allowing yourself to be at ease and have fluidity with allowing something to work out for you. For me, I had received several instances where I was sexually assaulted or sexually taken advantage of. Now, I know that I had a part to play in that, right? But understanding that did eventually hinder me from allowing myself to release the need to control things. So I was very much a control freak. I had to know everything about everything. I had to have my hand in every cookie jar, and I had to know and understand everything about everything so that I can't be taken advantage of. And I see that a lot with women. So this is a beautiful opportunity, and I invite you to explore where you are freely expressing yourself and where you're not, and ask yourself, was there something in the past, or what was the thing in the past where I felt the same way, and it was kind of like the catalyst for where I'm at now? So I want you to think about that, because when you are blocking yourself from creativity and flow, you're not able to create the business, the project, the relationships, the child that you've been desiring to create and manifest. Like, it's just stuck in that energy center, in that second energy center. It's not able to travel up through the rest of the energy centers. Okay, what was it like in your own family growing up? What were or are the attitudes around sexuality and sensuality? Did you go on vacations, take time to hang out and do nothing? Or were you constantly being pushed, or was there no investigation? What was the happiness quotient? Did you laugh, have fun, and play, or was it more of a controlled and restrictive environment? I can tell you from my own personal experience of my childhood, my family was relatively closed off about sexuality. It was not that it was never discussed, it's just that it wasn't very open. And so, like, yes, like, my mom expressed wanting to dress sexy for my dad. I experienced that. That's healthy. And I experienced, when my mom would, maybe flirt with another guy, or my dad would express his sexuality and his sensuality. But it was almost like, kind of like, more joked about than it was like really talked about. And in my family growing up, we definitely went on vacations, but they were kind of monotonous, meaning that there wasn't a lot of explore and play and investigation of like new things. Sometimes we did, but a lot of times it was kind of doing the same thing over and over. So there wasn't a lot of like creativity and flow in our family vacations. It was just kind of like doing the same thing each summer or whenever we went on family vacation. So that sounds familiar for you. That is a good indicator that you have a little bit of a stagnant energy, possibly in your second energy center. So it's really important to explore that, because like I said, like, if your family dynamic was very rigid around sexuality, it's very, very likely that you have some blockages, some subconscious blockages about your own sexuality and whether you feel free enough to explore that and express that. And again, my favorite exercise is to use masturbation through that. Okay. Now I want you to meditate on where you could let go. Where could you be more fluid and go with the flow in your life, such as your career, your relationships, plans for the future? Consider areas where you might be trying to control and allow yourself to completely surrender and let go of the river of your life, carrying you along to the next thing. I have found this to be challenging, but when I do allow myself to release something, it is like this burst of energy that I just get back. It's like it goes out and it comes back in. It's like the old energy goes out and the new energy comes back in. And I've done this several times, and I love using the power of visualization through meditation and imagining something that I've been holding on to and just letting myself release it. One of the activities I did with a cancer patient, she was an 80-some-year-old cancer patient, and she really, really struggled with the need to hold on to things and control things. She was a very, very explosive person and very emotionally charged. And I remember she would just get so angry. And so one of the activities I had her do, because she's holding her fist and she's like hit herself. And one of the activities that I had her do was to look at her fist and just imagine that there's something in there, whatever emotions that you have balled up, whatever thoughts you have balled up, and they're all just sitting there in your fist, in your closed fist. And imagine your hand just opening up and releasing. Everything just releases out of your hand. And she did that. And there was just this huge release.